Hello YouTube, this is Thomas Judge back once again, and today is another installment of my ongoing weekly series, Till the Fabled End. Today we are looking at the 15th and final deluxe edition for Fables. It's the 15th book and the final collection of the Fables mainline series. This is the cover thereof. Snow White, and various of the characters. Lovely image there. Spine, nice and straightforward. And the back says once upon a time, generic blurb, and that's the ending. Inside flap we have pull quotes, we have a Bill Willingham bio, and we have the standard end pages. So as this is the 15th and final deluxe edition for Fables, we can confirm that it has a really consistent visual style across the board. Every single volume has the same visual style, so this isn't one of those cases where the font size changes, or the trim size changes, or the design of the dust jacket changes, or the titles don't line up. This lines up perfectly, and there are images of my collection scattered throughout this this series. The first video will have them, the very last video will have them, there'll be a few others scattered around. You'll see them all on the shelf, they work perfectly. So, is this me, or does she look a little bit like Elijah Wood in this image? That's just me, but anyway, let's get into it. This is the final Fables Deluxe Edition, and as a result, let's look at what it collects. It collects, carrying on from the last volume, this collects issues 141 to 150. 150 is a massive issue. It's essentially the size of a trade paperback, and therefore, if you collect that in single issues, it'll be quite a weighty thing to pick up. So as we can see here, these are the issues there. Lots of it stuff like the final hurrah of, the very last story of, the ending of, the last story of this, the last story of that, and so on. And then kind of like a bit of an epilogue. Okay, so what we have here is a farewell address from Bill Willingham, so it's a forward by him, which is really, really interesting. Ironically, he wrote this in 2017, and in it he mentions they were making Wolf Among Us Part 2, which actually wasn't announced by 2017 when this came out, and actually got announced several years later because Telltale Games folded and came back as Skybound and so on and so forth. So, oh, here's some more contents. Like, all of these are just like 1-page, 2-page stories. So we have the last Toy Story, the last Frankie story, the last Death story. I mean, some of these are just 1 page long. So huge contents page, gives you an idea of how big issue 150 was. Sorry, as I was saying, this sort of introduction or farewell address from Bill Willingham is really good. I really enjoyed it, and we will be touching on the stuff he mentions here, like the Wolf Among Us, later on in this series. So let's go straight into issue 141. So what's happening at this point? Well, we've had the first several hardcovers, up to and including the Vanquishing of the Adversary. That was amazing, really good, highly recommended. We then had 2 or 3 hardcovers which were pretty weak. The introduction of Mr. Dark, who was some kind of big bad for the sake of being big and bad. But he got dispatched, and we then had a massive uptick in quality again, where we have characters doing crazy character stuff. And in this particular story, what we have here is Rose Red kind of enhancing her powers, becoming more of a key player, and a clear movement towards a kind of a final battle between Rose Red and Snow White, which is really, really interesting. And it kind of picks up, this is Snow White talking to her kids, and there's a lot of intrigue. As usual, characterization is great. As usual, the artwork is very, very consistent from Mark Buckingham across the series. And what we have as well is kind of like more resolution of what's happening with Bigby after he died. Surprise, surprise, he's coming back. And then throughout this, there's lots of things called the last insert here story. So this is the last Flycatcher story. It's literally 1 page long. And so there's loads of those scattered throughout. As a result, the entire narrative arc of 10 issues gives a real sense of closure, because it's kind of closing down and tying off loads of loose ends, whilst at the same time leaving some of them open, or adding up some intrigue for future series, which of course we'll be talking about later on. So what we have here is more stuff happening with Snow, more stuff happening with her kids and various things. And again, all this is kind of building up to war. All this is tension. All this is building up to a massive conflict between these two sisters. It does feel slightly arbitrary to an extent. I mean, yes, we're having yet again another battle and so on. But that said, it kind of feels like it's an organic thing that's grown out of the preceding events. The last Sinbad story is here. Only 3 pages long, but very cool. And it then carries on. So this is now chapter 3 of Happily Ever After. So here we have Nurse Spratz being evil. She's an awesome character in this now. Stuff with Cinderella, one of my favourite characters, which I'm very much looking forward to reading more of. And then we just have more stuff happening in the world. It's just interesting in that it fleshes out the characters even more. It continues the stories of characters we're interested in. It continues this big build-up of this impending battle. Here we can see one of the witches wearing one of the outfits from the Super Fable arc that we talked about. Yeah, it's good. It's enjoyable. It's all about closure. I'll be honest, it's all about closure. And I felt it gave a really good sense of closure whilst I was reading it. As I've mentioned several times, the whole Mr. Dark thing was a bit of a misstep, but after that it goes into quite a, like I say, a strong uptick. The story here is good. It's very enjoyable. And what the characters do is fun, the artwork is good, and this depiction of eventually leading into a battle between the two sisters, so Rose Red and then subsequently Snow White, is really exciting. Some of these, here you are, the last story of Prince Charming, some of these are really interesting. The artwork for some of these has got guest artists, which is really, really good. This is by Jay Lee. He's one of my favourite artists of all time. And then just continuing on, it's good. I'd go so far as to say it's great. I really enjoyed it. The one thing I would say is that the final mega battle, which it has been implying has been the case in the last hardcover, and then is very much the focus of this hardcover, ends in a slightly disappointing way. It's not bad. I'm not going to say it's bad. It definitely isn't. But it's also nowhere near as epic as the final battle where the adversary got dispatched. So as a result of that, take it or leave it. Overall, if I was going to look at the series as a whole, all 15 volumes, which of course is what I've been doing over the last 15 weeks, I would say it starts strong. It's brilliant up until around about issue 75, which, as we said, is when Vertigo series normally peak and finish. It then has a bit of a dip for a couple of dozen issues, which isn't great. But then after that, it picks up again and it becomes really, really strong again. This is the cover of issue 150. So these are issues 141 through to 149. And issue 150 is actually what they call a gatefold cover. So it's a cover that folds out here. So this is the full thing. And this is the breakdown there of all the different characters. I might use this picture as the thumbnail, because thumbnail images are quite hard to come by, at least in keeping with my aesthetic. So here we have it, the final issue of Fables, which is like this long. So this is what I mean, like if you buy it, the final issue of Fables is essentially a trade paperback. It's not really a single issue at all. And this has got everything. The fact that it's just a thick issue does make me feel that it was all wrapped up specifically, so it was 75 issues times 2. As I've said, Vertigo series normally go on for 75 issues. Fables carried on. And, you know, reading it now, I'm very happy that it carried on. This ending is great. It's a nice bit of closure. But I'm also glad that it ends at 150. And I get the feeling that Bill Williams spent some time kind of, especially over the last 4 or 5 issues, of planning a way of bringing a fair bit of closure and tying up a lot of the loose ends. We have characters that we've seen before coming back. So here we've got Fro Totenkinder, who's been gone for a couple of hardcovers. And we have sort of the resolution of Cinderella's story as well. Again, Cinderella, amazing. We have a couple of cool battles, various things going on, various clever twists and turns of the plot that, to be honest, I didn't really see coming. Yeah. I don't want to wax lyrical too much, but again, you know, like I say, I'm conscious that people want a bit more detail in these reviews than I've been giving to date. Look at that artwork. Great stuff. So here we have it. that is the end of Fables, issue 150, a trade paperback sized issue, bringing a lot of closure to a lot of things. Then, again, these last Snow Queen stories, 3-pager there. The last Blossom story. This is a prose story, but actually really well written. It reminded me of science fiction anthology books I used to read as a kid, where you'd have random writers, and you have like a little book about this thick with about 10 different science fiction stories from random people. It was all just very creative and very weird. You used to get, did anyone remember this? From Pan? Maybe Pan Macmillan? And you used to get horror anthologies and sci-fi anthologies, and they were like 80 volumes, and they were all really thin, cheap trade paperbacks. This reminds me of one of the stories from that, but in a good way. I actually really enjoyed it. Bit of a shift of pace reading prose and then going back to a comic, but there we are. The last Pinocchio story, the last Geppetto story, the last Lake story. The Lake story is kind of long. And then we have the last, is it Santa? No, the last Christmas story. The last story of many Fables. This is the last Boy Blue story. And so on. So you get an idea. Every single page is another bit of closure, another character being wrapped up, another character that we see, we check in on, and we kind of end their story. Yeah, loads of closure here. So if you're a fan of closure, as I know many people are, this will be it. The last Frankie story, the last Frankenstein story, the last Death story, which is a 1-pager. The last Snow and Bigby story. This has a epic gatefold. Did I just rip this? No, phew. It has an epic gatefold image, which is this one. So I'll open this up, and we have a 4-page gatefold image, which is again really nice. Big fan of these big splash pages. It looks great in deluxe oversize. Then we've got basically that's all. Goodbye and good night. What we then have is some stuff from Bill Willingham, just kind of talking through the experience, and then at the very end we've got a little afterword from Mark Buckingham, the artist. That takes us to the extra feature, just a little bit of extra features here, which is actually quite good. Often with these final volumes, pad it out with loads of random gump, but they haven't done so here. And then we've got some final bio details for the inkers, the colorists, things like that. Okay, Fables, Volume 15. What an odyssey it has been. Thank you for accompanying with me on this journey. I think there's 4 or 5 human viewers that are watching this. Thank you, I respect it. From my point of view, obviously the reason to do this was just as much to force myself to read my Fables collection as anything else, and I'm really glad that I did. Am I glad I own them all? Yeah. There are a couple of weak volumes, but overall this is a great 15-volume series. I am glad it's ended. That said, there are a few spin-offs, and that's what we're going to be looking at over the coming weeks and months. So I think most famous spin-off is one that's also in deluxe edition hardcover, and that is Jack of Fables. That's available as 3 deluxe edition hardcovers. We've seen a Jack of Fables crossover intersecting with Fables, which actually takes place after the Jack of Fables hardcover 2 and before Jack of Fables hardcover 3. So I know a little bit of what happens in Jack of Fables, so there were some kind of like vague spoilers in that. But that said, what I'm going to do now, having read book 15, is I'm now going to move on to reading Jack of Fables. So our homework for next time will be Jack of Fables Deluxe Edition Volume 1. We're then going to read those 3 deluxe editions. Just as a bit of a heads up in case it takes you a little while to track these volumes down. After that, we're going to be looking at all of Fairest, which is a spin-off series. All of a series called Ever After, also a spin-off series. We'll be looking at the Fables Encyclopedia, we'll be looking at the Wolf Among Us game, and I think we may well be looking at a couple of other things that intersect with the Fables universe as well, that I'll probably discuss and discover as we carry on. But until then, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next week with Jack of Fables Deluxe Edition, Volume 1.
Alright, thanks for watching everybody. As always, please like, comment, subscribe. As always, please follow me on Twitter at @IamThomasJudge, where I will post a daily review of whatever comics I've been reading. You can get an idea of what I'm up to on the channel. And as always, please support the channel by heading over to Amazon.com and checking out my prose novel about superheroes. It's a completely original piece of work. The first episode in it is called Arrivals, and the series as a whole is called No Gods or Kings. You can find an excerpt of that on my website, nogodsorkings.com. Until next time, everybody, stay classy.